Hi everyone, my name is Josh Edwards. I'm the co-host of the Hail on 3 Washington Commanders podcast. Brett, thanks for having me on again. I was on last year where I predicted that Washington would make the playoffs in Jayden Daniels' first season. I don't believe I predicted we would win multiple playoff games and make the NFC Championship game. I wasn't that bullish, but I am proud of the fact that I thought we would have an excellent season in the Dan Quinn's first season as head coach. New regime, and a heck of a lot of roster turnover. Obviously things have changed now, and we're in a brave new world in DC with our new quarterback, our new ownership, and our new coaching staff. So let's talk a little bit about this upcoming season. I am still very confident. Some of the additions we have made, which you wanted me to talk through, are very exciting. So personally, I think Laremy Tunsil trade for a premier left tackle is extremely exciting. Shores up the offensive line, gives Jayden Daniels protection he needs on the blind side. So that's not a sexy pick, but is a very exciting offensive line trenches guy that I think gives us an immediate upgrade at that position, one of the most important in the game. I'm also very excited about Deebo Samuel, actually. So a lot of people sleeping on Deebo, I think, because he's had such a checkered injury history, of course. I think lots of people are sort of been bitten by him in fantasy football and stuff like that, but he looks in good shape. I think he's a hell of an explosive player. He is playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with, and he's in an offensive scheme which I think will be able to utilise him very well, both out of the backfield but also stretching the field, which I think people will be a bit surprised at this year. I think you'll see him down the field and running the full route tree in Kingsbury's offence. Now, you wanted to talk about departures. I think actually Cliff Kingsbury staying rather than taking another head coaching gig is really, really important for the Commanders. Jayden Daniels gets continuity in his second year in the league. Hopefully that will mitigate some issues that people are foreseeing as a sophomore slump. I don't think that's as likely now, because I think Jayden Daniels is going to have a fantastic second season. Cliff Kingsbury hanging around will be a big part of that. There have been some departures. Obviously there's always going to be a lot of roster churn when you have such a disastrous regime in that of Ron Rivera and Bruce Allen. So there are lots of players on one-year deals who did play well and then have gone on to other things since. So Jeremy Chin in the secondary, I think, is a big loss. I think we surprised a lot of people when we traded Brian Robinson Jr. for just a 6th round pick to San Fran last week. The running back who had another good season last year. I think ultimately though, they want more explosive players from the backfield, and even though Brian Robinson Jr. is a good guy and dependable back, he wasn't the home run hitting back that they needed in that space. So you're going to see running back by committee. I think this is an unresolved issue. One of the unresolved issues you asked me to kind of bring up is how the backfield will operate. You have Austin Eckler, obviously the veteran, savvy pass catching back with good pass protection. You have Chris Rodriguez Jr., who's finally maybe getting a shot in the league to be a bit more of a workhorse back in Robinson's departure. And you have Corey Krosky-Merritt, 7th round pick, who didn't play last year in college because of an eligibility issue, but they love him. They think he's a steal in the draft. He might have been a 3rd rounder or something in their head, who went in the 7th because of his lack of play time last year and a bit of you're drafting the potential and the previous tape rather than the most recent tape. So that's very exciting. I think you're going to see, backfield by committee. Don't necessarily draft a Washington running back in fantasy football early, because we don't really know how it's going to shake out. So I think that's one unresolved issue. The good thing about me being really unorganised and not getting this video to you earlier is the biggest unresolved issue for the Commanders is now resolved, because Terry McLaurin has signed a long-term contract extension. So that was the kind of big thing hanging over Washington fans this off-season, was, is Terry going to sign? There was a hold in. He was at camp, but he didn't practice. He wanted more money than they were willing to give him. He ended up with a fantastic deal, more than DK Metcalf, and he is locked in. So the most professional and explosive player on their offense after Jayden Daniels is back, which is very exciting, and that is now resolved rather than unresolved, so I'm very happy about that. In terms of the prediction for the season, so a lot of people are predicting that sort of sophomore slump for Jayden Daniels and the team. It is harder on paper schedule, although I won't really go too much by that because things change mid-season. Injuries, teams that look great on paper suddenly don't have a quarterback, which is kind of what happened last season and why we were able to kind of win so many games, I think, because of the way some teams kind of fell off a cliff, and we were lucky to play them when we did. So I don't take too much into the schedule, but I would, note that there's some tough games on there in terms of divisions and matchups we've got. Obviously, the division itself is tough because we have the reigning Super Bowl champs in Philly, Dallas in the regular season, always a tough game, likely to be in and around the playoff mix. In spite of having traded Micah Parsons, I still think that that defense isn't great, and what was his actual upside to them relative to the kind of compensation they could get. I actually like that trade for them, as a side note. But yeah, so I think it's going to be tough, but I don't see the sophomore slump happening as much as others. I think Jayden Daniels is a truly top 3 to 5 elite quarterback in this league. I think people will see that this year, and agree with that. And I think he will be one of the faces of the league. And I think with the weapons that he now has around him, Terry signing, Deebo back, an interesting running back group, and a more shored up offensive line, I actually think he'll improve, if anything. I think the team will win at least 12 games. I know that's very bullish. I think we will probably go 13-4 or 12-5. We will win the NFC East because I think Philadelphia will have their own Super Bowl hangover slump. I do think they'll make the playoffs with a double-digit win season, but I think Washington wins the NFC East. So no back-to-back winner of the NFC East again. Hasn't happened in 20 years, and it won't happen this year. In terms of how far the Commanders can go in the playoffs, again, I'm confident, but it's a tough one. I think there's some interesting teams in the NFC this year. I think the Rams, the Packers will be right up there. I'm going to say that Washington at least repeats last season and makes the NFC Championship game. How about that for a prediction? Thanks for having me on, Brett. Really love doing these previews. Again, I'm being very bullish, but I'd like to see if you have anyone else on the NFC East talk about how confident they are in their teams. But yeah, let's go for it. Why not? I was spot on last year. Hopefully I'm spot on this year. Maybe it's some good karma. All right, cheers, Brett. Josh from Hail on 3 signing out.
The BCS podcast is written, produced, edited and hosted by me, Brett Walker. Thank you to Boris Anderoff and Pixabay for the use of the music and sound effects in this podcast.